The whole point of bankruptcy is saying, I don't have money. Well, apparently they have $500 billion. It's a shit ton of money. And basically,
big picture, it's a shit ton of money. That's all you need to know.
That is a math term. This is an official math term. It's shit ton.
Yeah.
And anyway, so if you have a shit ton or $500 billion, you don't need to file bankruptcy. And you don't get to file bankruptcy. And so anyway, the good news is that the second time it is dismissed.
Nice. Prioritizing profits. Prioritizing
dangerous drug and product cases.
Welcome back, everyone. Another episode of Prioritizing Profits, Dangerous Drug and Product Cases. Exciting times. Always good to be back and doing another show. How was your week?
Good. Just slogging into August. Still really crazy hot here in Arizona, for those of you not here.
Yeah, no, it's pretty miserable. I mean, we're planning on coming up to Señorita this weekend, and I warned Christina that I said, it's going to be crazy. Oh, don't worry, it's okay, we'll figure it out, it won't be that bad. All of a sudden, a week before, they're like, oh, you know what, I think it's going to be a little hot. I'm like, yeah, no, that's what I've been saying.
Well, okay. First of all, we were going to be, so Sonoita is Arizona's wine country, which people outside of Arizona don't believe that there is such a thing, but Arizona does have a wine country region, and apparently it is similar viticulturally.
Viticulturally?
I don't know if that's an actual term, but the terroir is similar to that in Napa, California. So anyway, as wines go, they are apparently pretty good here in this particular area of Arizona. So I think there's about 18 or 19 wineries now, and these are all within a 10-minute drive of our ranch down there. So the plan had been to take you guys wine tasting along with Kendall, who's apparently, I keep saying apparently again, back off of that. All right. Who is not apparent. She's definitely starting law school very soon, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
So that's very exciting. And yes, it's hot in Sonoita, but it is a whole lot less hot than it is in Phoenix. I mean, easily 20 degrees, because it's 10 degrees cooler than it is in Tucson, and we're pretty much 10 degrees cooler than you guys are.
That's the thing, though, is it's so unreasonably hot in Phoenix and Tucson that even that 20, which is pretty big, 15 to 20 difference isn't necessarily make it super comfortable. I mean, it's just better.
Well, it's still very hot, but if you get a breeze here or there, you stay in the shade. Anyway, that's fine. We will reconvene and do our group wine tasting at a later date when the temperature is more conducive to your sensibilities.
Yes. And it worked out because we rescheduled, or I guess redid the event. Now you and Peter are coming down for medieval dinner.
Yeah. I'm I guess excited about this. I know Peter's very excited about it. I'm not a big turkey leg fan, but I did actually look on the website, and they have vegetarian options and some other selections.
Perfect. I didn't even really think of that. I just immediately, the idea of watching people joust and have a full-blown turkey leg in your hand, I was just, who wouldn't like that? But I guess there are.
Well, I don't mind having one in my hand. I just don't want to put it in my mouth. I just think it's nasty.
I feel like if you don't want it, yeah, okay. Either way.
No, I get it. It's going to be more. It will be more authentic, and I will enjoy watching you guys enjoy your big old nasty turkey legs. But yeah, just not my kind of thing.
Yeah, and I'm excited. Next week we'll talk about it.
Yeah, I think we should have some good pictures on that too.
It's going to be an entire experience. There's sword fighting. There's a king and a queen that comes out on a
dais.
Yeah, and then there's jousting, and it's the entire thing. You sit in an area, so there's different colored knights. There's green, there's red, there's yellow, and then I think there's black, and the black one's always the bad guy.
Oh.
And then you sit in that section, the color section. Your seats are colored, and so you're always cheering for.
So do you get to pick the color when you go in, or do they just seat you randomly?
I think they seat you randomly. I'm not sure. Last time we went, we got there a little late, so we weren't really picky.
You didn't have a lot of choice.
Yeah, they just kind of threw us wherever they could.
Whoever needed extra cheering.
Exactly.
Extra energy.
Exactly. But then it's kind of like a little bit of a rivalry, and always You know, it's a good time. So I'm excited to have you guys experience it. I know Peter is he's an exciting guy, and he's easily impressed, I think, and especially when things are as exciting and impressive as this type of dinner. I think he'll.
Well, I don't know if he's necessarily easily impressed, but he has this very like childlike energy. Like
Yeah.
he just gets so happy and so excited about things. It's very refreshing.
Yeah.
So yeah, I can see he's going to be. I mean, this is going to be a new and unique experience, and he likes horses, obviously. I'm not sure if he likes jousting on horses. Although, I have to say, when we were in Palm Springs for a conference, he had never played polo or even been to a polo match, but he went and watched a polo practice, and then he signed himself up to take a polo class the next day.
The very next day.
Yeah, so as you were talking about this, I'm like, oh shit, he's going to be signing up for jousting.
Yeah.
I mean, they have those crazy Renaissance festival things like in parks and everything where people literally live their lives for this stuff, and they, nominate queens and kings and all kinds of craziness. Well, I shouldn't say craziness because, hey, whatever floats your boat, whatever is fun.
Yeah. Well, and then there's like it's not a sport, but it's like a hobbyist type thing where people will dress up with armor and they'll build their own like weapons.
Yeah.
And obviously it's not like sharp stuff. It's usually, a spool noodles as a sword or something like that.
Oh, man.
But they like fight with shields and stuff. And then you got bow and arrows, and there's like full wars that will go on.
Well, I have heard of that. So I'm wondering, though, if there's any jousting opportunities or if Peter's going to have to instigate that.
I think if there's anywhere that there would be that type of thing, it would probably be in the Arizona area, just because there's so many horses. You're not going to go to New York and find a jousting arena to perform in.
I don't know. Actually, I was really shocked because when I first started kind of getting into the whole horse thing, I thought, well, of course, Arizona, it's the Wild West and cowboys and horses and all of this. And then I read a statistic that there are more horses, like, I don't remember if it was per capita, per square foot in New Jersey than in any other state in the country.
Really? Why is that?
Well, it's totally different. I mean, so that's like the English riding, and, it's not like the cowboy Western riding.
Yeah.
But I think also then you go to it's a wealthy area.
Yeah.
And I bet it's like I don't know. It has to do with the space because New Jersey's so tiny. Maybe that's what it is.
That makes sense.
But I guess it's a really big deal there. So.
And I imagine the horses there are like the purebreds that you see on this green meadow that they're going across, and the people in the tights with the black hats.
Yeah, definitely.
Compared to here, it's a cowboy hat and some jeans.
And torn up jeans and yeah.
Different culture.
Definitely different. So anyway, well, we'll definitely report back on that next week. Big event for at least this part of Shower Law Firm.
Yeah. No, I'm excited. Christina's excited. I think we'll have a lot of fun. And it's just something unique, We unfortunately weren't able to make the Señorita thing happen, but hey, we made something
It'll happen again, yeah. Well, it's something. We get to hang out with you guys and have some fun. And I really miss Christina because she used to be coming down with you for these podcasts, and now with her job does not allow for that. So we don't get to see her as much. But.
Yeah, the schedule, that I drive down on isn't necessarily the most kind to full 8-hour shifts. So.
Oh, well, I'm excited.
Yeah. Well, let's get into it. Updates on cases. What's going on?
Well, all kinds of things are going on. Some pretty juicy stuff. One is Johnson & Johnson back in the news again.
In the news again.
Actually, probably always in the news because just the sheer number of products and not only over-the-counter products, but medications and medical devices, that sort of thing that they produce. Anyway, the hot topic of recent months has been this whole LTL Texas two-step bankruptcy deal that they had going on. And we talked about the fact that they basically, the two steps kind of tried to sidestep all of their liability for the talc cases. They were getting hit with some really big verdicts, rightfully so, in my opinion. I mean, yes, I'm biased, but some really big verdicts. And so they decided what they were going to do was basically create a subsidiary, call it LTL, and give it all of the obligations and on the talc and a certain amount of money. And that was $2 billion back when they tried that. it was objected to. Anyway, ultimately the court said no and dismissed it and said, this is not a company that is in financial distress. That bankruptcy is for companies that really are struggling. They cannot meet their financial obligations. These guys are a behemoth. They can pay. No, they don't get to do this. And literally, like within 3 hours of that dismissal, they refiled.
Oh, really?
They refiled, and this time they put in, I think it was $8.9 billion.
That's just so insane. I mean, it's like $2 billion, which is a ton of money. Don't get me wrong, but obviously these cases are pretty massive, and the damages are massive. And they're under this tense of we're going to go bankrupt, or filing for bankruptcy, and then gets dismissed, and out of nowhere they just pull out 4 times that as much money.
which clearly is a sign that it was basically a scam. I mean, here, we'll toss you $2 billion. I mean, like you said, it sounds like a big amount of money to people, but then when you look at the number of people that they killed and hurt and injured and destroyed their lives, and these verdicts that are coming in that are multi-million-dollar verdicts, how many people can you cover if they're getting awarded 11 million,
Well, and then they just have this other extra few billion hiding between the couch cushions. But they're like, yeah, you know what? Actually, we do have a little bit of extra change. We'll throw it out there.
Yeah, so now it's up to the $8.9 billion. Anyway, they filed that within about 3 hours, and they also recruited some plaintiffs' attorneys who had tout clients who then kind of got on board. It looked good. They were saying, yes, we think we can work with this and get, and compensate our clients. But again, there are other ways to compensate the clients other than through the bankruptcy process. You're putting this in the bankruptcy court. You're making the bankruptcy judges deal with it. And the whole point of bankruptcy is saying, I don't have money. Well, apparently they have $500 billion. It's a shit ton of money. And
yeah, big picture, it's a shit ton of money. That's all you need to know.
That is a math term. This is an official math term. It's shit ton.
Yeah.
And anyway, so if you have a shit ton or $500 billion, you don't need to file bankruptcy. And you don't get to file bankruptcy. And so anyway, the good news is that the second time it is dismissed.
Nice. You think next time they're going to come back, all right, guys, $20 billion. What about that?
Well, at some point, it's just just stop. Just come up with a settlement protocol. Get in there, negotiate a settlement. Other companies settle, massive litigations without filing bankruptcy.
Yeah.
That's not what it's for. And so I guess there was a motion filed requesting that the court prohibit them from filing again for at least 6 months.
Nice.
Yeah, so maybe give you some time in there. And, and these other trials are going forward. But, I mean, geez, already. I mean, within 3 hours, they'd filed that other time.
Yeah, I know. That's exactly what I was going to say. It's like 6 months, I mean, compared to their 3 hours. That's a lot of extra time they got to wait.
Very impatient. Well, I mean, and it's just, again, it's a delay tactic.
Yeah.
And because the cases get put on hold. And it's just a waste of time and money because all the attorneys are having to litigate this stuff and, I don't know, file their motions and argue, and you're taking up the time of the bankruptcy court that has better stuff to do, like deal with companies that really are hurting financially.
Yeah, and I mean, it sounds like, too, if they already refiled in 3 hours, then they weren't really expecting this to go through, right? Like, you got to have...
Well, they were ready. They had plan B.
Exactly. It's like they didn't put all their chips in that pile because they're like, okay, this is unlikely, but we're ready just in case.
Yeah.
And then another interesting point you brought up is it shouldn't be in the bankruptcies court at all, right? Because
exactly.
And it's not something they should be dealing with.
No, I mean, they should be dealing with companies that are really struggling, that are trying to restructure. I mean, there's a whole purpose of the bankruptcy code, and it's not avoiding liability when you have plenty of money.
Yeah.
It's just, it's outrageous. I mean, it almost, I want them to slap them around and sanction them and say,
beat
stop.
their ass.
Yeah.
Who do you think you are?
Stop it already. You're wasting time. Sanction them or something. I mean, it's like, people get all mad about frivolous lawsuits. Well, this is a frivolous bankruptcy filing, if you ask me. And I mean, they want, to fine attorneys and clients and all this if they file a frivolous case. Fine, I agree. well, what's this if not frivolous?
Well, and you said that they recruited a few plaintiff attorneys that said that kind of got on their side. What is that like? I mean, if it seems like a majority of the attorneys knew that this wasn't going to be good, that it shouldn't be there in the first situation. So how do they recruit those attorneys? Is it kind of they're a little slimy or?
Well, I don't, and I will just preface this by saying I don't know which attorneys and which firms were on board. I know that the firm that we specifically work with was definitely not on board and was fighting this tooth and nail. What happens a lot of times in these litigations, they go on for a long time. And, the law firms, the attorneys, they have a lot of these cases and they have their time and money tied up. Mm-hmm. And they start getting impatient and they're like, let's get these cases settled already, basically get our fees and fairly get the client's money sooner rather than later.
Yeah.
But there have historically been certain attorneys in certain firms, I mean, sometimes they'll call them the low-hanging fruit, that they can pick off and they can start getting, because they want to get it settled fast, they'll take less money. Mm-hmm. But what that does is it really can skew things. Yeah. And it's not necessarily fair. It's kind of quicker and easier. Mm-hmm. And so again, I mean, there may be, I can tell you though that even, when we've been in litigations where we're like, no, we need to hold out. I mean, there's always some clients who are just like, I want money now. I will take pennies on the dollar to get money now. But it's not, for the group as a whole, that oftentimes is detrimental.
And I think this kind of goes back to what we talked about last show, which was the bellwethers. The bellwethers. And so I'm assuming these companies will pick the low-hanging fruit for the bellwethers where it's like, look, these guys took this amount of money and it's obviously a lot lower than anyone's expecting or hoping for. And they use that as kind of an example case. Well,
so the bellwethers are referred to the actual trials that happen.
Oh, yeah.
But I get where you're going at, that if they can enter into settlements with some, they'll say, oh, look, we settled these cases for $50,000 a piece. And they're trying to use that as an example to convince other people that they should be taking that as well. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so it's not like the bellwether trial, but it's a similar thing
idea.
That maybe, it's the same idea. I mean, maybe they say, hey, we were able to do this. You guys should kind of fall in line. You should follow that ram.
Makes sense.
Follow the ballless ram with a bell.
Yeah.
See, and this is all kind of making sense. They're the ones that don't have the balls in this context.
So I guess you can definitely see both sides of it where, there are attorneys that are putting in a lot of their time, a lot of effort, a lot of resources into it. And there's also clients that maybe just don't have enough time as well. They want to get that settlement out of the way. They have their bills, they have their responsibilities. And so I'm sure it's not necessarily nefarious kind of workings there, but it is interesting that there are consistent law firms or attorneys that they kind of know like, hey, these guys are probably going to be a little bit more open to early and lower settlement.
Well, it's true. And I think it's, you can equate that to probably just what you've seen and understand too, like in the PI industry. I mean, there's certain law firms that where they know that they're not going to go to trial and they're probably going to take less money just to not litigate it and that sort of thing. And so, a firm or attorney can get a reputation that can be problematic. Mm-hmm. But and you have to be willing to fight it out. Once you have. So in this kind of, this comes up at different stages. So, for example, we're talking about like a global settlement. Once there is a global settlement, they come up with these, generally there will be like standard amounts for different levels of injury. Yeah. And in those situations, we always tell people, you don't have to participate in the global settlement. In the cases that are really strong cases, really high damage cases, oftentimes it's going to make more sense for them to opt out and to take their case to trial. But that is going to be much more time-consuming, risky, difficult for the plaintiff. And so there are times once that process is underway where you may sit down with a client and say, look, I recommend your case is worth more than what you're going to get doing, kind of the quicker, easier route. Yeah. I would recommend that you litigate it, but for a variety of reasons, they may say, no, I would rather take this amount of money
Yeah.
and have it in 6 months or whatever time frame it is, and kind of be guaranteed that that's the case than to take the risk and the time. So at that point, again, clients can make those individual decisions. But this is bigger. This is before, there's any kind of settlement protocol set up.
They're trying to just say, like, essentially put a cap on how much they're going to pay out on day one without even anything else going into it.
Yeah, and so what they did the first time was they said, okay, our cap is $2 billion. Now they say our cap is $8.9 billion, but there's still a cap.
Yeah.
And again, that's not what this whole process is for, and so it's really infuriating. But it's really great that they didn't get away with it because we were all like, woohoo! They didn't the first time. The judge saw through this, no way, and then bam, they tried again. And I think at this point they need to just stop bidding.
Yeah.
I mean, the answer is no. This isn't the right process. So.
Well, and you mentioned too when we first talked about it that it would set a dangerous precedent because then other companies would try that same exact tactic of putting a cap on the early days.
Picking a number.
Yeah.
Picking them. This is what we want to pay for what we've done to these people with this product. This is it. We're going to put it in this little pile over here. Mm-hmm. And then, oh, wow, we don't have any money. We're poor. We're broke. We're bankrupt. Ah.
Yeah. And meanwhile, they have $500 billion just in
$500 billion. And we were talking the other day, about Johnson & Johnson. I mean, it's a huge company, and I think people don't even realize how many products they have out there.
Yeah. Yeah, people don't realize that at all. I mean, we were looking up Johnson & Johnson, and I mean, I think there was like Tylenol, some off-brand. There's some Windex.
Well, actually, it's not off-brand. They have real Tylenol is Johnson & Johnson is the original. And actually, I printed out a list of some of these. I mean, just some things that you may not know. I mean, Aveeno Band-Aids.
Wow.
Band-Aids, Benadryl, Carefree, I mean, all those sanitary pads out there, Desitin, a lot of baby products, any of the Johnson baby products, Imodium, Listerine, Lubriderm, Motrin, Nicorette.
Wow. They seem to be hurting. They're looking for more income.
Yeah, Neosporin, Neutrogena, Pepcid, Rogaine, Stay Free. They've got the Carefree and the Stay Free. They've got. I mean, if you got your period, you're paying them. Sudafed, baby oil, Visine, Zyrtec.
It's just so crazy, and it's kind of scary too because I mean, obviously, a lot of those things have been around for a while. There's Tylenol, Windex, Listerine. I'm not going to be too worried about those, but just the idea that this company, who has clearly acted, kind of nefariously, right, in the past, I would argue. Yeah. And they have all of these different brands, medications, and just products in general under their name and getting their grubby little hands into.
Grubby big hands.
Yeah, it's a little concerning.
Well, and those are the over-the-counter products, but, they're also prescription medications. I mean, there's a gazillion of those. Well, okay, maybe not a gazillion, but maybe $500 billion. I mean, but they have, there's Xarelto, they have all of, hip and knee implants. I mean, they have so many products. They're literally everywhere.
Yeah.
And again, I mean, this isn't just baby oil and talcum powder, baby powder. I mean, they're everywhere. I guarantee you any single person listening to this can go into your kitchen or your bathroom.
Yeah.
You're going to have multiple products. Mm-hmm. They're not hurting.
Mm-hmm.
They're worried about their bottom line. They're worried about their profits. Yeah.
End of the year bonuses.
Yeah. They're going to be less than the normal billions that they are. So crazy stuff. But anyway, we're on the right track, I think. And so I'm hopeful that at some point, maybe in the not-so-distant future, the talc claimants will see a resolution. They'll give up and they'll come to the bargaining table, and maybe these cases can get resolved and people can move on with their lives. Yeah, and hopefully that 6-month kind of cool-down period gets implemented as well. So they have to wait more than 3 hours to refile. Well, I'm sure the judge is like, stop already. I mean, you can imagine, here it comes again. And it's just a few billion more, and they're just going to keep going and going until hopefully one of these days there's a number that I like. Anyways, so what else do we got going on? So another thing that we had talked about, well, this is an update and also kind of on cases that we're taking, the Ozempic. We had talked about a lot of the problems that was causing, and now there's another one. I think we said at the beginning, we were like, well, it's interesting because it's new and so many people are using it now that we're going to start seeing whatever problems are out there, we're going to see them more quickly because it's such widespread usage, and for questionable reasons. I mean, not necessarily health reasons, but a lot of cosmetic. So the next problem, the most recent, is gastroparesis, which is stomach paralysis.
Oh.
Yeah, and so one of the ways that the medication works, and it's Ozempic, Wegovy, there's several of these that are diabetes medications intended for type 2 diabetics, but now are being used by people who want to drop some quick weight, and what do you call it, the TikTok drug or whatever, celebrity drug. So what's happening, one of the ways that it works is that it slows the stomach's emptying. So it keeps the food in your stomach longer, and so you feel fuller, and that contributes to some of the side effects people are talking about, where they feel nauseous all the time, they vomit. I mean, because stuff is just sitting there in their stomachs for a long time. But so the extreme version of that is actual stomach paralysis.
So, and I'm assuming from what it sounds like is like you eat food and then it just sits there and your stomach doesn't know what to do with it. It can't move. It can't process it and push it through.
Right. I mean, it's supposed to slow it down, but what it's doing is it's just basically freezing up in some situations, and people, and that's part of the reason why people just have to vomit. I mean, it's not passing. It's not passing through their system, and it can. And it's not. Sometimes, if you stop taking the drug, the condition will subside, but what they're seeing is that it doesn't always. Jeez. And so this can be a permanent and really debilitating condition, and something that's not warned about. So there are cases getting filed now for this particular condition. We talked about the gallbladder issues, and so there are gallbladder cases, and now there are also the gastroparesis cases.
And so what do you do if that happens? I mean, you got to get that food through somehow, but if your stomach's just not processing it and not doing what it needs to do, you just squeeze your waist a little bit, help it out? I mean, what?
Well, no, I don't think that works, and I'm not sure about.
I don't think so either. So it's just banter there.
Yes. I'm not sure exactly what they do, but I know that you would need to get medical treatment, and they're saying that it could be permanent. So, it could, really affect your ability to eat normal food and to digest and that sort of thing. One of the other issues that this is causing that can be life-threatening, and one of the ways I think they kind of figured out that this was going on is that, when you have a surgery, doctors always tell you that you need to fast. Mm-hmm. And the reason that you need to fast is because if you have food in your stomach when you're under anesthesia, and you basically start to vomit, you can aspirate, and then it can get into your lungs. And that's really bad because, the stomach acids, your lungs can't handle that.
Oh, no, yeah.
So people can get pneumonia, it can be life-threatening. So it's very serious. And so what they were seeing is that they were telling patients to fast before surgeries, and they were still having this occur because their stomachs were full. And so now what they're saying is that they don't even know how long they should tell patients, but they want them to come off of the medication for at least a week before a surgery.
Yeah.
Whether that's going to work or not. Again, the anesthesiologist is saying, we don't know. Again, this is like a new thing, but it can be life-threatening.
Yeah, and is there even a way to check, I guess like an x-ray to see if there's still food in your stomach, or is it, they ask them to get off the medication for a week? What if that stomach paralysis is ongoing and the week doesn't actually matter that much?
I don't know. I mean, they're saying that they don't, right now the recommendation is just a week, but it may be that they have to change that. So I'm not sure exactly what they would do to check it out, and how you would basically treat it. We'll have to see. Yeah,
and I think I thought of a question here, because going back to what we said, where with more people using it, it's likely that there's going to be more issues that come up. And all these lawsuits kind of come around them not being warned about these risks.
Right.
And obviously they test the drug and they look for all the side effects and try to find it. But is it if there's something that is only going to come out 1 in 1,000, 1 in 10,000 cases, and I mean, realistically, you're not going to find that in the early testing phases. It's going to wait until it hits the market and it's widespread. So with Ozempic and I guess drugs in general, is there a certain level of likelihood of getting something where it's like it's not even realistic for the company to have known about it?
Well, yes, definitely. I mean, there are some things, and again, there's requirements on the testing that they're doing and the number of people and that sort of thing. And the rules are just that basically once it gets approved, they have to warn of the things that they know about, or that there's an indication that there's a problem. And so this is one where they don't warn about, but they know about this, the whole way that it works is one of the ways that it works is slowing the emptying of the food from the stomach. So it seems likely that, you can have this mild or extreme, and the extreme is this gastroparesis, and, that they likely had information that this did happen on occasion. And what you have to warn about is going to have to do with not only how often or how often it is or how likely it is to happen, but also the severity.
Yeah.
Because, if it's feeling slightly nauseated and it happens, that happens a lot. But if it's something that's really bad, even if it happens very infrequently, you should be warned about it.
Yeah.
So, and again, we don't know exactly how often it's going to happen with these newer drugs because they just haven't been out there that often. But if there's any chance of certain things that are life-threatening, those are things you should warn about. I'd want to know.
Yeah, because I think the Ozempic is a good example of that because one thing that we talked about when we originally went over this was that they're struggling to get enough Ozempic out there. People with diabetes are now struggling to get this drug because there's people without it that are using it for other reasons. So it's obviously clear they weren't expecting it to be this widely used. And so when there's this many more people than they had expected, it makes sense for there to be issues that come up that they didn't see or might have not known about.
Well, I guess, when you say that they didn't expect it to be this widely used, I mean, I don't know if you've seen the commercials for Ozempic.
No, I haven't.
Yeah, I mean, they're interesting because they're all like, oh, and you might lose weight too. I mean, oh yeah.
So they partly advertise it too.
Yeah, everybody in the world wants to lose weight. I mean, all right, I'm exaggerating, but not very much. And so, you know that. I mean, a drug that would make you lose weight is going to be a, gazillion,
more appealing than another one.
Well, and so I question whether they didn't really, encourage people to use it for that.
Yeah.
It'd be interesting to see, if they have anything to do with the influencers and all of those people who are, I mean, they're not sad about this. They're not sad about people being willing to pay out-of-pocket cash to get more than they can make.
Struggle, yeah, exactly.
I mean, they will manage to put their $500 billion into, I shouldn't say $500 billion, because not to say company, but they will put a lot of money into making these because they can sell them.
Yeah.
And it's expensive, like $10,000 a year. I mean, and you get a lot of people on this. So I guess I would be a little bit skeptical, thinking that they didn't know that this was a huge selling point to the drug.
Yeah, I mean, and that's so terrifying, the stomach paralysis. I mean, I guess for people that are taking it to lose weight, that's a little bit of a bonus. Like, hey, now you're going to struggle to ever put weight on because of it.
Well, and then you're going to die.
Has that happened if people are dying from
I
paralysis?
No, I don't know. I mean, I'm sure that there would be other things that would be factoring into it.
Yeah.
But I mean, if you can't sustain yourself, it's
you have an In-N-Out burger on Monday and then it's still sitting in your stomach Thursday, Friday. Yeah. that does.
Well, or you vomit it out because there's just no room anymore. It's not going through, so it's coming up.
And doesn't it destroy your throat when you vomit in your teeth too? That happens with a bulimia a lot, right?
Well, no, there's that, and there's the dehydration because people are which is super dangerous. I mean, because all of the fluids are coming out, and when you can't keep food down, I mean, ultimately you can die.
Yeah.
So.
God, that's terrifying.
I know, just like another thing with this, and we may be updating this every week. Who knows?
Yeah, I mean, it's a big drug. It's being used a lot more now. I think it's just recently that it's come to, the public purview. It's public light of just how widely used this is, how widely of a problem, how big of a problem this really is.
Yeah.
And it's getting worse and worse because more and more people are using it.
Yeah, definitely.
Awesome. Is any other updates?
Well, those are kind of the updates. So we can we can hop into what our topic of the week, as advertised, was summertime injuries. And we kind of decided to focus on this because I was looking at a case in the news last week involving a horrible Sea-Doo accident. And these are like the jet skis.
Are they called Sea-Doos?
Well, that's one of the brands. Yeah, that's a manufacturer, Sea-Doo.
Yeah, I feel like just jet ski accident.
Yeah, well, it's like Kleenex and tissues, I guess. There's a Sea-Doo is the specific brand.
Yeah, but a lot of
ski.
people, like depending where you're at, they'll just call a tissue Kleenex because
Right.
But no one calls. Oh, let me hop on that Sea-Doo. you use your Sea-Doo this weekend?
Well, they might if they're really proud because they have the original brand.
Yeah, if they're an enthusiast, maybe.
Yeah. So this came up because there was a lawsuit that was filed a couple of weeks ago over a Jersey Shore incident involving the Sea-Doo jet ski with a really serious injury. And it involved a woman who was riding on the back of the jet ski.
Does it have something to do with the propeller, like any of that?
Actually, this one doesn't. This one.
God, that's
I know. The boat injuries are just horrifying. Yeah, no, I've seen some of those cases, and they're pretty bad. But this is pretty horrendous as well. What happens, and it turns out that this is not an unusual injury, but if you fall off of the back, if a woman particularly falls off of the back of the Sea-Doo in the path, that water that's just being propelled basically hits you in the lower body. And so the description in this case, so it's the propulsion system, and the force of the water caused, quote, massive mutilating injuries to her lower body, orifices, and internal organs.
Jesus.
And as I was reading this, and I actually hadn't heard of this particular injury, and I was really horrified by it. And then, so I Googled it, and it turns out that it's not an uncommon injury, and it's called a douche injury. And so it's that water that just hits, and it just basically destroys the person. And so what happens is you're having this horrible internal bleeding. I mean, you potentially can bleed out right there in the water if you're not getting, if they don't get you out and get you emergency treatment. But even with emergency treatment, there's like multiple surgeries. People end up with colostomy bags, having to self-catheterize. I mean, basically, it's completely destroyed.
Yeah.
And it's so it's the horrifying thing, and what was so shocking to me when I started researching it is that this happens. That there's just numbers of these cases, so they know that this happens, and there are ways. So this lawsuit is against the manufacturer, and it's a design defect claim. So they're saying that the way that this is designed is unreasonably dangerous. Which, yeah, and they do. Some of them do have these little, I guess, warning stickers that say that when you're using these, when you're riding on these, you should wear a wetsuit. I mean,
Interesting.
I mean, again, these things are being used. You're out at the beach, you're in the Bahamas, you're in Florida, you're in the Jersey Shore, whatever. You're hopping on these things. You're out there this summer in a little bikini.
Well, I'm in Mexico. You just hop on it, and it's like $30 for an hour, something like that, and they bring it out to you. It's very casual. No.
Right. And so nobody was wearing wetsuits on these things. And I can't even imagine that these rental companies aren't like, I mean, you're not going to be at the Jersey Shore and just happen to have a wetsuit with you in the middle of the summer. No. So, I mean, are they offering somebody wetsuits? I doubt that.
Yeah.
But then you get the whole failure to warn argument too. And in any of these cases, like where you're renting, boats, jet skis, whatever products, there's always, there's a potential liability for the person, the rental company as well. They are also going to have an obligation to warn of dangers.
Yeah. Usually there's a waiver.
Well, yeah, we can get to the waiver issue also. But what these companies, they need to, warn you, and they need to give you some training. Well, and the other thing that I think that comes up in a lot of these cases is that they just are haphazardly renting these things to people who are oftentimes like completely drunk.
Oh yeah, I bet.
Right. I mean, and so, this is one type of injury, but with these jet skis, a lot of the injuries are them hitting people or crashing into each other. I mean, there have been multiple deaths and horrible injuries that aren't from this particular type of situation. Mm-hmm. And before we move on from that, just on this actual Sea-Doo case, the really strong argument in my mind about the design defect is that there's no like seat back, and so when somebody falls off backwards, right, right behind it, and I can just kind of see you fall back and you're like, kind of splay legs kind of thing. I could see how that could happen, as opposed to if you fall off on the side. And if you had an appropriate seat back, like if you think about like with motorcycles, right, then the person would be more likely to fall sideways, and they wouldn't have that propulsion injury. That water wouldn't be hitting them like that.
Yeah, even just like a small little backing to it. It doesn't have to be like the big ones. It's just something that kind of throws you to the side and
that keeps you from going straight backwards. And how easy would that be? And how many people would you potentially save from this horrendous injury and sometimes death?
That makes sense. And so is it just Sea-Doo, this specific jet ski brand? Because I feel like I have never seen a jet ski with that little back, and I'm assuming this is something that can happen no matter what brand it is.
Oh, yeah, no, any brand. And you're right, I haven't seen one that has that either, and any and all of them really should be, because this is a common enough injury that they have a name for it and that they're actually warning and saying, in small print or whatever, protect yourself, wear a wetsuit. They know about it, and why not just, people aren't going to wear the wetsuit. That's just not the option. And so, put the seat back on. How much more difficult could that be?
No, that makes sense. So what what stage is that case in right now, and how's it looking?
So the one in the Jersey Shore was just recently filed, and so that was in the news. But then when I looked at it, there were a number of cases that had gone to trial and that had been resolved with similar injuries.
And resolved, is it like they're settling outside of court?
Yeah, they could be settled or and again with multiple defendants. I mean, there'll be the manufacturer on the failure or the design defect, but then there also could be, the negligent entrustment, failure to warn on behalf of also the rental agencies.
Yeah, I mean, that's just the injury there is so horrendous and debilitating. I can't even imagine. And, it makes sense that there is a lot of issues with jet skis, especially because, I mean, you look at them, how fast they go. There's no, like, protection or anything like that. You can fly off and once you add alcohol to the equation too, I can see a lot of potential problems coming up. Yeah.
Well, and you may realize that one of the reasons that this caught my attention was our experience on a jet ski.
It was a while ago.
Yeah, it was a little while ago, and we happened to be in Maui, and we were with actually Valerie and JP, and you really wanted to drive.
Yeah, I mean, I went to Mexico several times before it, and I've driven my own whenever I went to Mexico.
But was this before the Maui? Because you were like 14 or 15 when we were Maui.
Yeah, well, what you do, because they don't technically let you in Mexico, but what would happen is I would drive out there with my dad, and then he would hop on someone else's, and then I would go solo around. Yeah. So they didn't know about it, and I'm not supposed to. In Hawaii, they were a lot more attentive to.
Well, we had to tell them you were 16.
Yeah,
I do recall that.
Well, and that was just to drive it. I don't think I could have my own until I was 18.
Okay. Yeah. Well, I know you were driving it, and I was on the back.
Yeah.
And luckily, when you took a crazy fast turn, I was thrown off to the side. Which is pretty scary. In fact, the whole thing turned over, I think, didn't it?
Oh, maybe.
Yeah.
I might have.
You got it back. And so after that, I then got on Valerie's. I was like, I'm not riding with him anymore. And so you drove the thing on your own.
That's like the most fun part, is just going absurdly fast and not knowing if you're going to fly off in the next turn or anything like that.
Yeah. But, I mean, and so when you say that, I mean, that's the common thing. I mean, that's exactly, people get on these things because they want to drive fast, they want to have fun. I do remember them saying, about when you fall off and if it turns over, what to do and everything. So they actually kind of expected you to fall off.
Yeah.
But they didn't, I guarantee you, they didn't say anything about if you fell off straight backwards, what could happen.
Yeah.
I mean, that would have been memorable to me, and that was not explained. And, again, luckily we fell off to the side, and probably that happens a lot. But, in these cases, so when you're doing the turn, if you're making a big turn, then you're likely to fall off at the side. But, I mean, when you take off, and if somebody's not holding on.
Well, also, when you're going, especially if you're going against the current, when you're going straight, you're going up and down, you're slamming into the waves.
Yeah.
You can easily just fall backwards.
Yeah, that's true. Well, and the other thing is that there aren't hand grips either.
Oh, no, yeah.
I mean, so again, another thing that another way to make it safer. And these things just don't seem that complicated. I mean, the seat back makes the most sense to me. But I mean, having some hand grips too. I mean, in one of the cases they were talking, I think it might have been this specific one, that she didn't, she wasn't kind of ready and braced when the driver took off, so she threw off backwards.
Yeah.
So at that point, if she wasn't ready, she wasn't going to be holding on. But still, that seat back would have saved her in that case. So.
I feel like it comes from an aesthetic point of view of like why they didn't want to add it, because jet skis do have a very like sleek and
or aerodynamic, like it's
yeah.
gonna, like somehow that's gonna add some drag, and you're not gonna go quite as fast.
Yeah.
I mean, come on.
I mean, it still should be there regardless for safety reasons, but I guess I feel like that's probably where their mindset is at.
Yeah, I guess. I don't know. But I will just say that I have not been on one again since that time.
It was a good time. It's been a while. I want to go to Mexico soon and experience it. And although I am terrified of descent, like out in the middle of the ocean. Like that's one thing is I love jet skis. I love driving. I'm not a big boat fan, but one of the reasons I don't want to go on a cruise is just the idea of being out so far out in the middle of the ocean and what's down in the ocean. I think it's like we've only explored like it's under 10%, I know, of the ocean floor especially. That's terrifying. You don't know what's down there, and sharks and giant squids.
Well, then there's like a couple of the movies about these megalodons that they're,
Yeah, Meg 2's coming out.
Oh, okay.
Meg 2's coming out.
Have you seen these?
No. That's like one of the really cheesy action movies that I don't like, where there's no real story or like character development. It's just it throws CGI at you and hopes that you walk away like, wow, that was cool.
Nah, I don't like this. I like the real shark movies. Like, actually, one of the most memorable movies I think I've ever seen is called Open Water. Have you ever seen that one?
No, I don't think so.
Yeah, so it involves, and it's based on a true story, which is so terrifying too. But it's this couple, and they're out on a it's a diving tour. So yeah, scuba diving tour, and it's sloppy. I don't know. It's in Mexico or some third world country. I don't know where. But when they are collecting everybody to go back, they don't do the count, and 2 people are left out at sea in open
Terrifying.
water.
Like that's nightmare fuel right there. Just forgotten about in the middle of the ocean, and you just how do you even find someone that's just out there?
Yeah, I mean it's a very intense movie, and it's I like it too. I've seen it a few times. I mean, it's pretty crazy, and they're out there, and of course, sharks start coming around, and yeah. So I would recommend it anyway. But I mean, it will only feed your fears.
I think of Soul Surfer, because that movie was really big when I was younger.
Is that the one who had her arm bitten?
Yeah. And then she was like a famous surfboarder, and she's just out there chilling, and all of a sudden, boom, arm taken off. That is terrifying.
But I mean, she came back and she continued surfing, and I mean that did not dissuade her from. I mean, that's a real passion for surfing.
It is. I mean, her story is impressive for sure, but just that experience overall, terrible. Well, anyways,
we got a little off track there, didn't we? Well, although actually not really, because we were talking about, kind of summer injuries and things that tend to happen in the summer. And so one of the categories, of course, are beaches and swimming. And so, yeah, sharks would be one of them. I don't know. Well, actually, I shouldn't say that there's nobody to sue, because, again, if it's a a beach where they have spotted sharks and haven't warned about it, usually, you'll see all the signs, and but that's a less likely to.
Who would you even sue? Like the city for that? I mean, there's
That
not
would
many.
be pretty, yeah. I mean, there's all kinds of protections with recreational, with governmental recreational facilities, that sort of thing. If it was a private situation, that's a little bit different.
Yeah.
And definitely, you take a private scuba diving tour and they abandon you in the middle of the ocean. That's a big fat lawsuit. I'll take that case.
Did they get found or did they just die out there?
They died.
Oh my God. In the movie, did they die too?
Yeah.
Wow. You'd think that a movie would try to have like a positive ending to it. But
Well, it was a true story. It was a true story.
Well, even with true stories, they kind of like, hey, it's not that bad, guys. Yeah.
Well, this will spoil it, but now I have to tell you because it's so intense.
Yeah.
But, so the sharks come by, and of course, one gets nicked, and
then it's game over. Once there's a little bit of blood, what is it? It's like 2-mile radius, all the blood just wake up.
But the thing that was so intense to me, so it's the husband, he's eaten, and the wife is still there, and she knows, it's just a matter of time. And so what she does is she, I don't know how they do it. I'm not a diver, but she does whatever she does that she just sinks herself because she just wants to drown. She doesn't want to stay and be eaten.
Yeah, for sure. I just don't know how you would do that.
Well, there's something with scuba equipment where you there's something that takes you down and then something that brings you up again. I don't know the situation on that, but I mean, she basically does whatever it is, and you just see her go down, and she's just like, she wants to drown.
Yeah, I mean, me too.
Yeah,
you watch your significant other get eaten by sharks, and either you're surrounded by blood, and it's just a matter of time. And dying from a shark, I mean, I feel like that just has to be one of the most gruesome ways to die as well. They take a piece of you, come up for air, you're sitting there struggling, and just slowly dismembered.
Well, and then at the end of the movie, they catch a shark, and how they slice them open, and
oh my God! And there's an arm comes out.
Come the fins.
Yeah. And I always think it's crazy too. Is like when that happens. This happened in Soul Surfer too. Is they try to find the animal, cut it open, and reattach.
Well, that's a little late.
I swear that this happens though, and it
I can't imagine. I mean, even if you lose a finger, you have to put it on ice, and it's like if you don't get it to the hospital in 30 minutes, you're done. I mean, you're gonna catch a shark and open it up.
Well, it happens with crocodiles. Crocodiles will do their death rolls, which is also another gruesome thing.
God,
take an arm, take a limb, and then they'll go out there hunting for it, try to get it. Insane. Anyways, that's pretty off topic.
That is crazy. Well, all right. So to get back on topic, so there are lots of things that are, I guess, more cases that are more likely to be happening in the summer. And, we talked a little bit about boating. Again, there's lots of people out, on the lakes, renting boats, owning boats, driving boats inebriated, that sort of thing. Rife with lawsuits, as you might imagine. And then those propeller cases, those are pretty horrifying.
And is that usually the driver that's getting sued? Is it if they're renting it? I'm assuming that's the renting agency.
Yeah, I mean, usually it's going to be the driver initially, and some people have their own boats and they're going to have their insurance. But then, again, if there's a rental agency, they're going to have certain responsibilities. And, in some of the cases involve boats and things that are not well maintained. So there's that argument.
Oh, yeah.
And then the product itself may be designed, like we talked about with the Sea-Doos. Yeah, so those are some big ones. Oh, and of course pools and private pools and
water parks.
Parks. Yeah, and it was interesting. I was reading they were talking about that there are safety standards at these places. And you have to, there's a certain number of lifeguards per number of people that's recommended that would meet the standards, and then the time frame within which you need to respond to somebody who's in distress.
Yeah.
And I think they were saying one of the standards I think was within 20 or 30 seconds you need to be at least trying to provide assistance.
Jeez.
So, again, if you have one of these facilities and you hire lifeguards, they need to be on the ball. They need to be paying attention. They need to be not checking out, the women in the hot bikinis and all that kind of
Well,
stuff.
in some of the water parks, like I've seen the wave machines. Sometimes, I mean, that is body to body in there. The amount of people and like, especially if they're in the tubes and then the tubes are just body to body in there. Having even a handful of lifeguards, like that's just so many people to be keeping an eye on. It's hard to see underneath the water. And if someone's drowning, I mean, hopefully they're, struggling, but at some point they're, under the water.
Well, and that's the other thing too. There's probably, a maximum number of people that is safe under the circumstances. And if they are exceeding that, that's going to be, a potential claim. And so if somebody is injured at one of these facilities, I mean, you want to talk to somebody and see there are a variety of different ways that you might look at it, and different standards that would apply. So it's important, to talk to somebody and, you might think, oh, gee, well, I mean, I went into this water park and I signed a waiver. And again, waivers aren't always enforceable.
Yeah.
Many, many times they're not. And you think, oh, I can't do anything, I signed it, but that's, oftentimes not the case. So it's important to check it out.
I would imagine there's a lot of problems to a water park just because, I don't know, I used to love them as a kid. And then as I grew up, I realized just how kind of grimy they can be and are.
Yeah.
I mean, like when you're walking around outside the slides, you can see nuts and bolts hanging out. And then, when you're in the big pools, you just know you're swimming in a cesspool of urine and probably someone's poop somewhere.
I was going to say, I mean, with all these kids and stuff.
Yeah, exactly.
Crazy stuff.
And just so many bodies, so many kids, so much going on.
Yeah. Well, there was in the news, one of the cases I was looking at, and this just happened recently, it was a settlement. This happened in Georgia, somewhere near Atlanta, at this Margaritaville water park. The incident actually happened 3 years ago, but it just got settled. It involved a 4-year-old boy who was apparently drowning, and I think the park staff didn't respond for an estimated 10 minutes. This poor child is completely, he requires round-the-clock care. I mean, he had, a brain injury.
Yeah.
I mean, you're down for 10 minutes. That's just crazy. Apparently, they're saying he'll never be able to walk, talk, eat, care for himself. So very significant. And at that same place, there had been a death a few years before that where father and son both drowned. The son was drowning. The father tried to save him, and the father ended up drowning. Really crappy lifeguarding there at that point.
The brain damage situation is so terrifying and so crazy to me because someone can be without oxygen just for 1-2 minutes, and the type of damage that it can do is just shocking.
Yeah.
And it's unpredictable, right? Like sometimes there's not that much damage, and sometimes there's a lot in a short amount of time.
Well, yeah. I mean, sometimes it depends on a short amount of time, but as you get into 10 minutes, I mean, it's like that's bad news.
I didn't even know Margaritaville had water parks.
Yeah, I guess they have like a beach.
Yeah. I wonder, how water parks have like that big toilet bowl one where you slide around in a circle? I wonder if it's just like a big margarita glass. Salt around the rim.
Well, it seems like kind of a bad idea to be equating alcohol with the water park to start with.
That too.
And then you're going to say, "Oh, I didn't know everybody was drunk." Well, I mean, I'm sure they're selling margaritas right in the left,
100%.
too. Hello.
Yeah, and the amount I piss when I drink as well. Oh, those pools have to be even more of a cesspool than the usual ones.
Oh, sounds scary.
Well, that's interesting, and I think it makes sense that there's a lot more injuries during summer. I mean, everyone's just out, they're traveling, they're doing the things that they've been waiting to do.
Well, you're on vacation, so you're doing all of these kind of fun and
crazy things. You're saving up money for that stuff too, so it does add up, and it makes sense to be a little bit more careful and observant, I guess, around those times.
Yeah, definitely. But I know here in Arizona, kids are back to school this week, so
Really?
beginning of August. Yeah, I know it's usually different on the East Coast. They start later, sometimes even closer to Labor Day, but here we let out so early, like in May. So kids are back in school, so maybe some of these injuries and types of incidents will will lessen, although it's still, as we said at the beginning, ridiculously hot here, and people are trying to stay in the water as much as possible, and pools, and and of course pools that you can have private pools in people's homes as well. And I mean, there's all kinds of crazy incidents that happen, and those cases oftentimes would be compensable under homeowners policy, and and of course, I feel actually quite lucky that in your multitude of parties in our pool that we've never had a lawsuit.
I'm shocked as well. Very thankful, but
I'm very thankful. Yeah, I mean, many of the parties that I didn't know about, we'll just add that, but I heard about it afterwards.
I can promise we did not have any lifeguards on duty. Should have, though. We are coming to a close here on the show. Do we have any questions?
We do have a question. And I think I've lost mine, but our question was about social media and how does social media impact my case, which is a really good question and something that I've always talked to people about it very, very early on, to not get on social media when you're involved in a lawsuit. I mean, anything and everything that you post can certainly be used against you. I can't tell you how many cases there have been where, people do have serious injuries, but, again, you don't post. Social media isn't everything that's happening in your life, the good, the bad, the ugly. It's only the good.
Yeah.
And so when you post all of these still positive, good things, it's very easy for the defense attorney or the insurance company to say, well, look,
they're on a jet ski out here in the middle of Hawaii.
Obviously your back isn't hurting so bad, or obviously those sorts of things. And again, it's just they will use anything and everything. So just be very careful about social media, and even when you're not involved in a lawsuit, keep your accounts private, and and think about what you're posting. Back in the day, we didn't have to worry about
Back
that.
in my day.
Back in the good old days.
We used to have to send a letter to say hello.
I was just talking to Peter the other day about, we were talking about how with you would take pictures and you had no idea if the shots were good or not. You had to, take the film to the drugstore and wait for 4 or 5 days to get the pictures processed and then look at them and see if there were any good ones or not. There was none of this instant gratification. And
that's true. No filters as well.
Well, that's true. For sure.
On the topic of social media, though, I think that's something to always be wary about, because I'm sure there's a lot of situations, too, where they post it. And even if they, have an idea to be careful, they can skew certain things in just the perfect way that they want to and frame it and then, be a little slippery with the way that they present information.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, I think any attorney is going to tell you that if you're involved in a lawsuit, shut down all of your social media. And one of the things, so what comes up in a lot of the mass torts as well. But for example, when in the Taxotere cases, this was the breast cancer medication that caused permanent hair loss rather than temporary hair loss and was not warned about. But there were actual support groups for women who had experienced this permanent hair loss, and that was on Facebook. And so one of the things is we had to download our clients' Facebook accounts. Also, pictures, because for the issue there was this permanent hair loss, and they wanted before pictures of the person to see what their hair looked like before, and then during their treatment and after. And so any of these photographs, I mean, basically they get to get everything.
Yeah.
So, you just need to be aware of that if you're posting these things, they may, come back and be used against you.
Super unfortunate, but that's something I didn't really think about, but it makes sense for no matter what type of case or what case it is to just be better careful than sorry and sign off for a few weeks, a few months. Year or two.
Exactly.
It's better for mental health as well.
Well, yeah. I mean, then we talk about those cases too, especially for teens and young adults.
Yeah.
Very dangerous.
All right. Well, I guess we should just probably start to close it up. Is there any teasers or sneak peeks for next week's show?
Well, I thought we would talk about dram shop cases. So, which is an interesting term just in and of itself. But basically, it involves the liability of bars and restaurants for serving alcoholic beverages when an injury occurs. Then subsequently, not a product case per se, but it's something that comes up a lot. We see a lot of those cases, and it's just an interesting topic. So that would get into.
Yeah, I think that is interesting because I know they're supposed to only serve 2 drinks, or some places have really specific restrictions. But I know I've gone to restaurants and I've slammed 4 or 5, and they're still pushing more onto me. I'm not looking for that gratuity.
Yeah, so an interesting topic. So that we jump into that, and of course, I'm sure there will be lots of other things that come up between now and then that we will just need to talk about.
Yes, as always. Well, thank you everyone for tuning in to another week of Prioritizing Profits. It felt like it was a good show. We will be back next week, exact same time, same day. Throw us a follow. Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, whatever it is. Definitely throw us a follow. Keep up to date with all of the potential risks and just ongoings in the mass tort world, and as well as just little stuff here and there. And then if you have any questions, feel free to ask them in the comment section of wherever you're seeing it. We keep an eye on just about everything. And then if you don't want too much attention on that question, fully understand, you can email info@showeredlaw.com or podcast@showeredlaw.com. And we'll definitely talk about your question and keep you anonymous. But other than that, I think that's it for us. Thank you again for tuning in, and we'll see you next week.
See you next week.
Prioritizing profits. Prioritizing
dangerous drug and product cases.